Welcome back to the Weekend Ball podcast. We are here, Oren, Weisfeld, and I, talking about Canada's 93-83 win against Australia, where Canada really showed out, especially in that second half. Oren, thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. People might not know, but you're pretty locked into the Canada basketball side of things, writing a book, part of a documentary as well. But just what did you make of this win? And maybe it really felt like almost a statement win for the program to kind of see where finally the collection of talent has all come together at the right time, and they just played so well, especially in that second half.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Definitely a statement win in the sense of like the program has always actually modeled itself after the Australia program.
Hmm.
Like dating back many years, they used to like go to Australia and they used to have ties with them and they used to because the countries are similarly set up, they're really big and have populations all over. They kind of copied a lot of what Australia did because they've had such a good basketball program for so long, taking bits and pieces here and there, such as the performance center for performance in different provinces. That was something Australia had. So yeah, in that sense, it's kind of like beating up on your big brother after you kind of steal stuff from them. But obviously the talent is a whole different ball game compared to the Australian program at this point in time. And that's really a credit to the players more than anything. But yeah, it was fun to see a lot of guys have good games who I'm sure we'll talk about, but really down the line, Shea, Dort, RJ, Dylan, even Jamal Murray, I want to talk about. I thought he had some really good moments defensively, so it was a good game.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. It felt like in the first half, Canada just could not contain the ball. Australia was getting down to the rim a lot of kind of easy layups, not containing, the ball. But it kind of changed in that second half, and it was just it's so fun. We'll talk about Shea and RJ, but just to watch Dylan Brooks and Lou Dort just steal people's lunch money is just incredible, and that kind of turned the tide of the game where it felt like an NBA game where it just everyone's scoring at will. Josh Giddey is looking like prime Michael Jordan. And then they kind of like they did last year in spurts. Canada turns up that, perimeter defense, and then it leads to offense as well. Do you think that's just like that second half is basically what the heights of this team will be, is they just have that perimeter defense that leads to kind of everything else working well for them?
Yeah, that was definitely the formula. Like I tweeted this out, but in the first half they had two fast break points and I think 6 points off turnovers. And in the second half they had 22 points off turnovers. So that's obviously the formula and it didn't really work well in the first half. But yeah, they started to get stops. They started to play a little bit, just more aggressively on defense, but also like certain substitution patterns, like Ken Burch instead of Trey Lyles or Kelly Olynyk, I think was a defensive substitution. Um, so stuff like that helped, and they just got out. And when this team is getting stops and they're out on the run, that's obviously when they're at their
Mhm.
best.
Um, how many times did you kind of almost fall off your chair watching Shea make ridiculous shot after ridiculous shot? Because I feel like this game was almost a highlight package. He only had 16 points, but if I think all of his points, his field goals were pretty must watch.
Yeah, I think all of his field world goals were like felt like they were all like self-created mid-range jumpers. Uh Couple of them were really nice. Like the one on Green was, I think, definitely a foul that didn't get called. But honestly, I've gotten pretty used to watching Shea in the mid range hit these shots, so I've come to kind of take it for granted a little bit. Because this is kind of what you expect from him at this point, and he's been clearly like just the best player of the tournament, I think, through two games. Um, yeah, I've been really impressed with him. Like he hasn't taken any time to kind of get his rhythm. He just has it as soon as the game starts, and he has a great balance of when to get off the ball, when to shoot, when the team needs scoring. Defensively, he had a couple blocks, a couple steals in this game. So Shea has done everything you could ask for. He's been extremely efficient too through two games. And yeah, I guess this is kind of what you expect. But if this keeps up throughout the whole tournament, this is kind of what gives them a real medal chance.
It was interesting at halftime. I was thinking to myself, like, I wasn't too worried because it feels like every time Canada's in a close game, you're like, well, they have Shea. And
Hmm.
that's going to be the difference, right? I mean, I don't want to. I think, talking to people that lived through the 90s, and Michael Jordan, there's that almost like that air of inevitability in those close games. And it feels like I'm not comparing him to Michael Jordan, but there's something where, as a Canada fan, you're like, okay, it's like a 2, 3 point game. It's close. You're like, well, Shea will make, three key buckets at the end, and then you're good, right? And it didn't actually matter at the end because of how well Canada played
Hmm.
second half. But it feels like in these tight games, which they're going to be more and more as the tournament progresses, just to have that guy who just is a closer, doesn't get rattled at all. And he's just such a joy to watch. Like it's just he's so smart, he's so smooth. As you said, he doesn't just hound the ball, right? He's not just jacking up a bunch of shots willy-nilly. But we're pretty lucky in Canada to have Shea.
Hmm. And that's something this whole team does. Is like they don't really take a lot of bad shots. Like everyone's moving the ball, everyone's being super unselfish. And obviously every here and there you see a guy take up like a contested one, but for the most part, they've really done a good job kind of playing as a team and passing up okay shots for better ones. And yeah, definitely starts at the top with Shea and Jamal and those guys getting off the ball.
You live in Toronto, cover the Raptors time to time. Are we seeing like the next face of the franchise and RJ Barrett, who was unbelievable for the Raptors down the stretch last year when he got traded, and in FIBA, he's just been amazing. He's been Canada's leading scorer the past 2 games,
Hmm.
on pretty efficient shooting, just getting down the hill, not too many turnovers. Like he's just playing the right way, not forcing it, picking his spots. He's just such a delight to watch. And I think Shea is obviously, I think, been Canada's best player, but RJ's been right there with him. Like there hasn't been a huge gulf between Canada's best and second best player.
Yeah, also 5 assists from RJ tonight, which kind of surprises me.
Hmm.
I didn't notice he had that many, but yeah, like this is definitely his ideal role, just kind of playing off a guy as good as Shea. I don't think RJ looks this good if he's not playing with as much floor spacing and shot creation as he is, but in this role, he's really kind of managed to perfect it. And I've talked about this before, but I think he was always the man growing up, in a sense. He was the top high school player in his class and all that, but he also has always known how to play off guys, play off stars, and I think that comes from playing FIBA from such a young age. It's just not like a isolation based game. It's always like you have to learn how to be a role player, I think, to succeed in FIBA. And I think that's where this comes from. So this is nothing new from RJ. This is years of reps in a similar role, I would say, to the one he's playing right now. And he also plays a similar role on the Raptors right now as he does on this team. So it's nice to see for sure the shooting come along
Yep.
and kind of him manage to pick his spots better. And even defensively, I think he's taking little strides here and there, but nothing too new from RJ, just a little more efficiency.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. Out of all the players, he feels the most comfortable in the FIBA setting, right? And he grew up playing for Canada. He won that U19 team
Mhm.
gold medal back, I think it was 2017. Won the MVP, killed the US in the semifinal. But you can just tell, I mean, he's not exactly like Patty Mills, but he just knows the game, the FIBA style. It's not
Mhm.
new to him. While like you can tell some of the NBA guys that didn't play for Canada, too much internationally, kind of trying to acclimatize, and it's just really nice to see. And he's been amazing. But you wanted to talk about Jamal Murray because I thought he had a really interesting game where if you look at the box score, 2 of 7, not super efficient. He did have 5 assists, but it really felt he was much more noticeable, especially in that second half. But just overall, he played much better. Felt like his legs were a bit more underneath him, a bit
Mhm.
more yeah, not as maybe I wouldn't say limping, but he seemed like he was moving around a bit better than in the first game.
Yeah, I mean, he played 24 minutes, which is the most he's played in an exhibition or a game. So that's obviously a good sign. But yeah, I think like for Jamal, for me, the worry coming in was kind of like, is he gonna think he is hero mode Jamal Murray, Denver Nuggets Jamal Murray, who's the closer on that team, and kind of like take all these shots and kind of demand the ball, even if he's not in a rhythm. And what we saw today is like he's really just letting the game come to him. Like you said, he's not there 100% the way he's moving, or even like Jordy kind of mentioned that he had pretty much he said he had a minutes restriction after last game, and that they're basically building him up so that he can play his best basketball in the games, the knockout games that count, which is a good strategy. But today, like he had 5 assists, he just kept the ball moving on offense. He wasn't taking bad shots after he kind of realized that it wasn't his night to score. And then defensively, I think he had 2 blocks. Like he had some key stops down the stretch too. And especially it wasn't as good in the first half, but he really locked in with the rest of the guys in the second half. And that's why he managed to stay on the court for as much as he was. It wasn't like he was scoring. The one three I think he took in the second half was a step back that was like very, very off. But you know, he's Jamal Murray. He still commands respect. He still is going to space the floor even if he's not hitting shots. And he just kind of used that gravity to get his teammates involved to keep the ball moving. So I thought it was a pretty encouraging game. Obviously, offensively, he's not in the rhythm that you want to see from him. And they are going to need his scoring or Andrew Nemhard, one of those guys at least to pop off. But yeah, I think just in terms of the progression, he's getting better each game.
Yeah, and I think he also is acclimatizing with the team a bit better. And I thought the bench unit, like with when Shea went out and it was Nemhard and Jamal, like they kept Canada in the game. And
Mhm.
I thought they looked better together. I thought Nemhard had a really good first half, all things considered, and then in the second half he was a bit less noticeable. But it's pretty nice to have Jamal Murray and Andrew Nemhard off the bench, and it feels like you alluded to it, right? Is Jamal Murray gonna think he's the alpha dog or, with Shea on the team? But it feels as though with him on off the bench, it kind of might be the perfect role where he is almost the center of the bench unit to some degree, right? And can take the shots that he needs and kind of wants rather than maybe going against Shea. Not that there's really any animosity or anything like that, but just it feels like basketball wise, it makes actually more sense on this team for him to come off the bench. And maybe that should, a good segue to the starters because Lou Dort and Dylan Brooks have been just like their plus minus has been unbelievable in the first two games. And I was pretty out on that starting lineup. I didn't think that made sense. I watched them a lot as you did last summer, and they had stretches where it was good. But offensively, I just thought not enough ball movement, not enough creators outside of Shea. But they've definitely proven me wrong. And I guess uh, Dylan can call me one of the doubters. Not that I was out on his game, but just that starting lineup. What do you think's kind of made that group work really well so far?
Yeah. I was also wrong though. I still have some reservations about it. I still think Jamal Murray should start for Lou if he can in the game. Doesn't really matter, but I mean, it doesn't really matter if he's going to play a lot of minutes and come in early. But yeah, like that group in the exhibition games definitely got too sticky at times, the ball. Like this game started with Lou missing a three and then having a turnover, so I was already worried early on. But um what what I think they did well, I think Shea and RJ really kept them in the first half, just making shots. And then in the second half, they picked up the defensive intensity. And when that group's able to get out on the break, they're great. And that's kind of like the idea if you're going to play Lou and Dylan together is that like nobody can score on these guys. And you could just keep guys in front of you, can make it really tough to run your sets with ball pressure and stuff like that. And that's what they did in the second half. They just got stops and they ran and
Yeah.
those guys also hit shots. So yeah, I'm curious to see if like we will be proven wrong and if this is just the starting group for the whole tournament and if it just keeps working against maybe better defensive teams or if they do need an injection of ball handling like a Jamal Murray or an Andrew Nemhart.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Their offense was actually very good all game, and it felt like they were getting a good shot after good shot after good shot for the most part. Unlike in the Greece game where there was a couple spells where was a bit ISO heavy and they weren't getting what they wanted. I do think I was thinking about it throughout the game that it felt as though as the game progressed, the fact that it was essentially two heavy NBA lineup teams that that kind of favored Canada just because they had a bit more talent, just the stylistically. Australia, in the first half was getting on the offensive rebounds, kind of getting in the paint, kind of bully balling, and then the game kind of shifted in the second half, as you mentioned, because I think Lou Dort and Brooks were kind of limiting Australia to become a perimeter team, and if that's going to be the case between Canada's perimeter and Australia's, as good as Josh Giddey was, but he took a step back in that second half as well, and it was just really
Hmm.
nice to see them just finally coalesce where it felt like they put in a stretch of basketball where they played really well against a really good team.
Yeah, I think some of that too had to do with like they kind of switched the matchups. Like they switched a lot. Like I think they switched all of the second half. So that's obviously tough for Australia to deal with. But they put Dort on Giddy to start the second half, and that was definitely a key. Like he obviously knows his game pretty well from being teammates with him for as long as he was. And that's typically what they've been doing is putting Dort on a guard and Dylan on a bigger guy. But with Patty Mills, the other kind of threat, they went the opposite way in the start of the game. But yeah, they switched those matchups. Dort saw more of Giddy in the second half. And I think that that also gave them the Australia. Australia had trouble. Like in the first half, Australia played an amazing half, and I give them a lot of credit. Like Giddy was just hitting step backs on the switches. They were finishing all their stuff at the rim and from 2 point range, they were hitting a bunch of shots. Like you got to give Australia a lot of credit for just the way they played, and I didn't really think it was sustainable, just the way they were hitting shots. So yeah.
No, I also give credit to Jordy Fernandez because I thought it was interesting how he realized that, this isn't really a Trey Lyles game. This isn't really a Kelly Olynyk game. And he didn't go to Lyles really in the second half. Same with Olynyk. And he went with
Hmm.
Birch, who I thought, maybe he'd like a little bit more finishing around the rim with him, but just defensively was really good, especially against Australia's size, right? Like he put him in and Australia struggled to kind of get on the offensive rebounds that they were getting with Dwight Powell, who played well, but just size-wise, Birch is just a bit bigger. So I think Fernandez, for the most part, did really well in the second half, as you mentioned, changing some
Hmm.
of the defensive lineups, putting Dort on Giddy, playing more Birch, and I think it really worked. I thought the way he played, substituted Shea made a lot of sense, right? Kind of trying to make him play all the fourth quarter. He saw him being tired. He
Yeah.
gets him out for 1 minute, and then he's back, and Shea looked back at it after, you know, basically doing everything for like a 3 minute stretch where he's blocking people, stealing, running down, making shots, right? And you could just see him off when he was taking off, just like taking deep breaths, trying to calm himself down and kind of grab a breath. But I thought the rotations were really good by Jordan. I thought he really grew into the game tactically.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think he's learning a lot about his team. And one thing he's learning is that I think two big lineups are going to be tough to get out there. Maybe against certain matchups, it'll be a little easier, but even against Greece, they struggled. And like he originally wanted the bench to be Lyles and Olynyk as the bigs, but it hasn't worked really well throughout, exhibitions or the games. And in this game, you saw him go to one bigs throughout the whole game, mostly. Kem or Dwight Powell, but then there was times when Lyles was the lone big out there, Olynyk was the lone big out there. So I think what he's learning is four perimeter guys and one big is kind of the key to unlock this team. But yeah, I'll just be curious to see what like Kelly's role looks
I
like going
was
forward in this tournament. I don't know if he's gonna be on the outside of the rotation looking in.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I don't know what his role is on this team because he's not a five and he's just not good enough defensively to really guard anyone on the perimeter. Like some
Mhm.
fours, I guess for some countries might make sense, but I just don't understand. I don't see or know what his kind of position is on this team. And not that he's a bad player, but you have so many perimeter, like really good perimeter players it feels like it makes more sense to ride and die with those guys who can also defend at a decent level than putting someone out there who, is a really good passer, good shooter, a pretty good offensive player, but just on the other side of the ball. And then who's your other big, and then you're clogging the paint and defensively, right? So it seems like I don't know what his role is, and even Trey Lyles too. I thought he probably was the most noticeable player who didn't have a good game for Canada. Um, and even then, like he's not really a five. Like he can play the five, but you don't really want him to. So I wonder if going forward it's going to be a lot of Powell and Birch, and I don't really hate it. I actually don't mind it at all. Again, you wish those guys were a bit more of shot blockers and maybe a bit better around the rim, getting their own, but defensively they're great and they know their role and they set really good screens, which is what you need for when you have a bunch of really good guards. So I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic to see what Jordy does with his rotation on the front court moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Lyles, I think Lyles will kind of stay in it a little bit more because he's a little bit better moving around the perimeter or even playing that small ball five. But like Kelly, yeah, he's still a good player, and I think in the NBA you can mask these defensive things a little better. But on this team, it's just they have enough scoring. Like they have so much creation, they don't really need that from him, and that's what he's always kind of given to these teams. It's just been an offensive hub. And so if stuff's not running through him, he's just a lot less useful out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. The other player that I think will definitely get minutes, but I wonder about his role is Nikhil. Just
Hmm.
with how well Dort has been playing, and obviously, the same goes for Brooks, and then you have the Murray and Nemhard off the bench. It's like what like Nikhil is he a three, I guess, but he's more of a two, in an ideal world, right? And so. He hasn't been playing a lot in these games, comparatively, right? To I think I'm just trying to find how much he played. He played 9 minutes tonight, and that I wonder if that's even going to be a high for him moving forward in kind of the bigger games where rotations get cut down. Like what do you think maybe Canada's like 7 or 8 guys are? Like it feels like it's a bit kind of obvious with the starters, Nemhard and Murray, of course, and then maybe a big. Like it feels like in the big games, like are you playing Nikhil? Are you playing Olynyk? Are you playing Lyles? I really don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's probably the seven you mentioned, and then one of Kem or Lyles
Yeah.
would be my bet in the games that really matter.
Yeah. I want to maybe go a bit bigger picture just with this game because, I alluded to it in the open, but it really it's just I know like we're both huge diehard kind of, Canada basketball lifers, I guess, but to just see them play that well with all that talent, um it just feels so cool. And I know I'm not really saying anything interesting, but the fact of the matter is that Canada, it really feels like they've arrived at the Olympics right now. And it finally feels like all the pieces are coming together and that they really have a legitimate chance to get a medal, make a final maybe. And I think that would also really change the way people look at basketball in this country.
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely cool. Like it's hard to step back from it because, um, yeah, there's a team that I think can medal, can challenge for gold even if everything goes right. So I'm so locked into kind of what's gonna happen over the next few games, and I don't want to like stop and look at what's already happened because,
Don't want to get ahead of yourself.
yeah, because yeah, I think that this team is. They're moving in all the right directions, and I think it's going to be, the best basketball is yet to come for this team and also in this tournament. So it should be fun to watch. And yeah, they have big goals in this tournament. They went into it kind of stating publicly they wanted to win gold. So we have to kind of, I think, approach it with the same attitude and, not be too happy with the win in the group stage.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a fair point. If you have high expectations, beating Australia, who's a good team, shouldn't be
Hmm.
and it
Yeah,
isn't.
like they're a good team, great program historically, but realistically, their best player is Josh Giddey. Like we do have to like hit the brakes in some regard, you know?
Yeah.
Like if Canada lost this game, it would have been disappointment. Like
Yeah.
we have at least two guys who are better than their best player. So yeah, I kind of expected them to win. They took care of business and just
Maybe.
because like yeah.
Mhm. No, no, continue.
Just because like the way the exhibition games were going too, and the Greece win, who I thought was going to be their toughest opponent in terms of like a bad matchup in the group stage, I just have a lot of confidence in the group.
Yeah, no, and they play Spain and maybe talk about um, where this team is now in the group because they've won both games. They haven't clinched a quarterfinal spot, but they've essentially clinched it because it's almost impossible to come third and not be one of the best two third place teams with two
Mhm.
wins. So they've 99.999% locked themselves into the quarters. But the interesting thing will be, obviously, if they lose to Spain, they might not win the group. But also, the fact of the matter is that where are they seated, right, moving forward? And the way the Olympics will be doing the quarterfinals is a bit convoluted. Essentially, all the teams get re-ranked, reordered. But if you go 3-0, you're definitely one of the top three teams, and then potentially maybe one of the top two, who would then play one of the third or place teams in the other group. And I think that should be really the goal for Canada. I'm a bit worried because I don't know. It feels like the US will definitely be one of the one or two, and then Canada doesn't have any teams to beat up on in the group play. So it feels like they might be going to that third seed, and then you play a second place team, and it's like I don't want to play Serbia, I, who they could play because Serbia got blown out by the US.
Yeah.
France, I think they beat. I'm not really high on France. And I'm not sure. Do
Mm.
you know if I probably should have done the research, but do you know if they could play a team in their group that they've already played?
N- No, they can't play a team in their group. Definitely not in the quarterfinals.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
but
I don't think until the finals, but definitely not in the
okay, so maybe they
quarterfinals.
get some chicanery where they can play a third place team because I think that's really what you want is if you play maybe no offense to South Sudan, but who are really good and they would
Yeah.
pose a threat or Brazil or a team like that where you feel like okay, they'd have a pretty I mean, Canada lost to Brazil last year, but overall, you feel very confident in that compared to a France, a Serbia, maybe a Germany, where you're pretty.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want them to play Serbia. That would scare the heck out of me. Canada trying
No,
to,
me too.
yeah,
Me too. I think they're the second best team or the third best team. But looking at it now, Canada, it's going to come down to point differential, like you said. If they win or lose, like if they win, it's going to come to point differential for who the second team, first and second teams are overall standing. Then if they lose, it's going to come to point differential for who makes it out of the group. But Canada is +10 right now. Australia is +2. Spain's -12. So if they beat Spain, their point differential is going to be greater than +10. So I think they'll have a really good chance of snagging one of those two top seeds. And then yeah, even if they lost to Spain, their point differential is in a place right now where they're probably going to be one of the top two teams in the group anyways. So they're in a really good position. But yeah, obviously right now just the focus is beating Spain on Friday.
yeah. No, what do you think? Maybe we won't go too much into it, but obviously last summer, Canada, thanks to Shea and Dylan Brooks going berserk in the fourth quarter against Spain, came rallied back and clinched a spot at the Olympics. But what kind of test and they beat Greece today actually for people that don't know. So they'll have a lot on the line to make it out of the group to beat Canada. What kind of tests and problems does a team like Spain present for Canada?
Yeah, I didn't get to see Spain's game. I think it was at like 5 a.m. this morning, so I missed that
Come on,
one.
wake up, Warren. Come on.
I know. I'm not grinding enough.
Yeah, no, I was not up either, so it's me and you both.
Yeah. But I think honestly similar problems that Australia is going to give you in the sense that like last year in the game, what happened was Canada tried to, you know, have like their normal ball screen coverage, and Spain just was too quick and they had to go to switching. And so you're gonna probably have to go to switching against Spain, and then it's just like, how do you kind of defend those mismatches that they're gonna get? Because Spain is just so well trained on, okay, there's a mismatch in the post, we find the guy and we space out. They're so well trained on, okay, guard, and they have new guards like Lorenzo Brown, who wasn't there, naturalized citizen Lorenzo Brown, former Raptor.
Yep.
Um, who, if he sees Dwight Powell on a switch, it's like, okay, how are you kind of helping on that? How are you navigating that? So I think it's going to be similar problems because they are going to have to go to a switchy scheme. It should be a little easier because like one thing that happened in that Spain game was Lou Dort started the second half of it for Kelly Olynyk. He's obviously going to start this game at the beginning because Kelly just wasn't quick enough for Spain, and Lou is, so that should help. But yeah, I think you're kind of, you want to be able to just navigate ball screens like going over the top and chasing, but
Hmm.
Spain makes that so difficult with how quickly they move the ball out of those. Um, so once you start switching, that's kind of when the game really starts.
Hmm. Interesting. I do think also offensively that the team last year maybe struggled against the Spain is that they just would have little moments where they couldn't find a bucket here and there, even though their offense was really good in the tournament. But it feels as though this team, just with the
Mhm.
additions of Nemhard and Murray, it doesn't really feel like they go through real stretches of not being able to get good looks, to score. And that I think against a team like Spain, which isn't, talent wise, it's good. If Canada can really just defend, as you mentioned, the screens and play at an adequate level, they should be able to score a lot on the Spanish team, and that should really kind of be the determining factor in the game. But, Spain's really smart, as you said. If you don't know, if you're not up for it, they'll cook you alive on back screens and little
Mhm.
really smart basketball. So it will be definitely a test. It's not an easy game, but this isn't the Spain of 2008 and 2012. It's just talent wise isn't. I would be pretty scared if I saw two Gasols in their prime coming down. I would maybe bet against Canada in that game, but overall it will be a tough test. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a fascinating coaching matchup because these teams kind of know each other pretty well at this point too, and obviously the coaches have a history.
Hmm.
Sergio Scariolo pulled out a box and one today against Giannis in Greece at the end of the game, so watch for stuff like that against Shea potentially even.
Well, there was a triple team today on Shea. Did you see that? Or it felt
I
like a
think
triple.
so. The
Yeah.
one he scored on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I just remembered from last year was Willie Hernan Gomez killed them on the boards, and that's another thing to watch for is the rebounding.
And I never got it because they actually took Willie out at the end of that game because of defense. And I was like, you're gonna still score with him on the court. I don't like, there's times ticking. And so thank you, Sergio, for taking him out because I really believe that if they had kept him in, I think Canada would have lost that game because they had no one to guard him. But I do think like a guy like Kem Birch is actually a pretty good matchup for Hernan Gomez, he's just strong enough to kind of keep up with him. And I don't think Powell just has that girth that Birch has. But that'll be an interesting matchup. But defensively, I kind of like Shea against Spain and offensively, and you could see in that game down the stretch he was getting every shot that he wanted, and that's an interesting thing too. Like just maybe going back to Shea a bit, but today like they put Dyson Daniels on him who played really well defensively, but then Shea would still kind of get to where he wanted, and they put on Josh Green. Like they threw a bunch of pretty good defenders on him, and he didn't really miss a beat. He still went 8 for 10. And I think that's something that just it feels like we're no matter who anyone throws at Canada, Shea will just get the shot he wants, which is really fun to watch and really a good sign that he seems to be really just at the peak of his powers.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, because Australia's probably the best perimeter defense you're going to play outside the United States, maybe Serbia, but like they have really good perimeter defenders and guys like Dyson Daniels, Josh Green, the other guy from Dallas who I'm blanking on right now.
Oh, I can't think of it now. 1 second, I'll find it. Anyways,
Yeah. But like the way he looked at Greece's defenders in the first game, like he literally disrespected them. Like he was
Dante
just
Exum.
pulling out, yeah, Don Daxon. He was just pulling out dribble combos. Like it was too easy for him. This game was definitely more of a challenge, though he was still really efficient. But I expect like Spain has worse defenders on the perimeter than Australia does, so it should be a pretty
Yeah.
routine game for him there too. And yeah, outside of teams like Serbia and the United States, like Shea's not going to look at a whole lot of defenders in this tournament. And like, this is a guy who's used to being defended by like the best perimeter defenders in the world. So
Hmm.
nothing new.
Nothing new. Nothing new. Is there anything else that you maybe extrapolated from this game that you maybe want to talk about before I wrap up and we get this show on the road?
No, not really. I think we hit everything.
Anything you
Yeah.
want to plug for you have a bunch of things coming up and on in the ether. Is there anything you want to kind of plug? Any stories, anything like that?
Sure. I mean, if people, I wrote about the state of high school basketball in Toronto for tvo.org if people want to go there.
Government man, government man. Yeah,
Learn
but
about that.
it was a good piece. I really liked it. Yeah, it was cool.
Thanks. Yeah, it was interesting to learn about that stuff and how much it's changed. And
Mm,
um, I wrote about why I don't trust Team USA for The Guardian. That looks
love
like a
it.
bad take so far, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm still worried
There's
about that
there's
team.
gonna be there's gonna be one game for the US where it's close and they'll be
Yeah.
tested and we'll see if LeBron can carry them home at 40. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
I just don't like the approach they've taken. It's been a very arrogant one where they think they are different than everyone else and they've treated the Olympic preparation that way. Like I don't know if you know, they're staying in Paris. Every other team is
Yeah,
staying in Lille. They traveled from Vegas to Abu Dhabi to
to
London to
London.
France, which is a
Yeah.
ridiculous travel schedule. They still don't really know who their rotations are. Um,
Jason
so
Tatum's
obviously
been playing.
they have the talent and they have all the pieces they need, but I don't think they're a good FIBA team still.
No.
And I think they're going to get tested at one point in this tournament. Maybe it'll be by Canada.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's gonna be the one thing I will say is if Canada plays the USA and the game is close, I really like our chances because I do think we do have the best player on either team. I might get hate for it. Some people will say Joel Embiid. I'm kidding. Um, but I do think if Canada can get into a close game against the US, they definitely have a chance. It's just almost like getting to the fourth quarter and just staying in it and not falling down just because of the talent wise. But it's going to be interesting. And yeah, I do think a team like Germany I really like in this tournament. I think, they played the US really well. I think that could be a really tough opponent for the Americans. Serbia didn't look very good against them in the last game, and I'm still high on Serbia, but I don't know if they're the best team to play against the US. But we'll see. Canada's up there. I think that'd be a fun fight, and I don't think that game in Vegas really meant too much. If you looked at the rotations, Jordy just put on like essentially hockey lineups of 5 and 5, and that would not be the case. And Canada played pretty even with the States when the starters were playing, but when the bench played, it went
Yeah.
fell off a cliff. So we'll see. We'll see. Well, you're a government man
Yeah.
now, and the government in Canada should give Shea the honor of Canada if he gets Canada to a gold. And yeah, it'll be fun. I'll be back at it covering the women on Thursday, and then we'll be doing a podcast obviously here for the Spain game on Friday. But thanks so much, Oren, for taking the time and doing this. And hopefully, in a couple and maybe 10 days from now, you'll be celebrating alongside myself with maybe a little bit of gold, uh, you know, on our minds. But thanks so much, Oren, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks for having me, man.